Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Paul, and today I've brought some stories that are particularly focused on the wilderness. These are narrative style stories, the same kind I used to post before. So if you enjoy them, do let me know in the comments. Without further ado, let's focus on the stories.
This happened to me about 11 years ago, back in 2015 in the Alaskan wilderness, specifically in the spruce forest of coastal Alaska. Now I normally go hiking every weekend, so this particular weekend was no different. I finished up my work, packed my bag with everything I needed, and headed out. It was toward the end of August, 2015, and this time I decided not to take my usual route. A friend had suggested a new trail I'd never been on before. He mentioned that it wasn't an easy route, but the views from up there were absolutely stunning. Now, anyone familiar with coastal Alaska knows that the forests there are home to all kinds of wildlife. So just in case I happened to cross paths with any of them, I decided to bring a baseball bat with me for protection. Honestly, I wasn't all that worried about the wildlife. As in all my previous camping trips, I had come across various animals before, and most of the time, yelling loudly at them was enough to scare them off. So I wasn't really expecting anything too serious this time either. But still, whenever you're out hiking or camping, especially alone, you never really know what might happen. So I always make it a point to carry something for protection, just in case things take an unexpected turn. Now let me describe the route to where I was headed. To get there, the first thing I had to do was cross a river. There were two options for that. One was to swim across, which wasn't practical at all. And the second option, which is what I went with, was a rail bridge that connected both sides. But the only problem was that crossing a rail bridge on foot isn't exactly allowed, so the only safe window to use it was in the morning, when no trains were running. So I parked my truck on the side of the road as close as I could, walked straight to the river, and crossed over using that bridge. But shortly after crossing to the other side, a strange feeling began to stir inside me. It wasn't fear exactly. It was more the feeling of being just one person, completely alone in the middle of this vast forest. Other than that, the forest seemed completely normal, like any other forest. So I pushed that nervousness aside and told myself it was probably just from crossing the rail bridge. And honestly, the bridge was in pretty bad shape. Several sections were broken, making it far from safe to walk across. It was also quite high above the river, so the thought of falling into the water was already in the back of my mind. And there was another worry too. I mean, what if a train suddenly came? The river was wide, the crossing was long, and if a train did come, there was nowhere to go. The only option would have been to jump straight into the river, which wasn't a good option at all, especially when the water was nearly freezing cold. I pushed all of this out of my head and focused on the trail ahead. As I moved forward, I soon came across a creek, not too far from the river. It was a nice sight, but when I got a little closer, I noticed a large number of moose tracks around it. At first glance, the tracks seemed bigger than usual, and it looked like at least 10 to 12 moose had been around that creek within the last few hours. And as I moved a little further, I noticed bear tracks and wolf tracks nearby as well. They had probably just come there to drink water, so it wasn't necessarily a reason to panic. But one thing kept nagging at me. The tracks were quite fresh. On one hand, it was exciting to see, and on the other, it did start to make me a little nervous, because the only protection I had was a baseball bat, and there was no guarantee that would be enough to save me, especially if it came down to a bear. After looking around for a bit, I continued down the trail. About 150 yards in, I turned toward the riverbed and kept moving deeper into the green woods. Every now and then, I kept checking my compass to make sure I was heading in the right direction. After a while, the trees got denser and further along. fallen trees began blocking parts of the path. My visibility dropped down to about 5 or 6 feet. So the first thing I did was climb on top of a fallen tree to get a better view and figure out where I was heading. When I climbed down to the other side, I noticed the ground around me was scattered with moose bones. Moose in these dense forests can get incredibly large, sometimes close to 1,800 pounds. So looking at those enormous skeletons, a doubt crept into my mind. Would the baseball bat I brought actually be of any real use if I came face to face with a moose that size? Sure, I knew that yelling loudly and making aggressive movements might scare them off. But what if it came to an actual fight? Would my baseball bat even stand a chance? I didn't think about it any further and kept moving. A little while later, I came across several blueberry bushes. I love blueberries, and whenever I go hiking or camping, I always keep an eye out for them. So I picked quite a few and continued on. By this point, I had been hiking for about 4 hours and was starting to feel tired. I decided to find a good spot, set down my backpack, and rest for a bit. I also wanted to eat the blueberries I had picked. After looking around for a while, I found a good spot. I put down my backpack, took out my water bottle, started heating some water, and pulled out the instant noodles I had brought along. I sat there eating my noodles and snacking on the blueberries. It was actually quite pleasant. The view of the forest from that spot was really beautiful. And then, out of nowhere, a question popped into my head that hadn't crossed my mind before. Those large moose skeletons I had seen earlier, if something had hunted them, was it a person or another predator or something else? The skeletons were clearly old, at least a year to a year and a half. But when you're alone, your mind tends to drift toward unsettling thoughts. Sitting in that calm, peaceful place, the moment that thought crept in, it sent a chill down my spine. While thinking about all of this, I started feeling drowsy. I decided to take a quick power nap, but what I didn't realize was that it would turn into hours of sleep. When I woke up, it was already very late, and the sun had started to set. And right at that moment, I heard a cracking sound, about 30 feet from where I had been resting. I immediately grabbed my baseball bat. I already knew it probably wasn't anything serious, but the combination of those unsettling thoughts before I fell asleep and waking up suddenly had put me on edge. I waited for a while, but after that one sound, everything went completely silent. I didn't waste any more time and packed up my backpack and started heading back toward where I had picked the blueberries. I always mark trees along the way, so I don't get lost on the way back. But after walking for a little while, a chill ran through me. Because just 10 feet ahead, I could see a moose lying dead on the ground. But the way it was lying there, no moose just ends up like that on its own. Something had hunted it, and whatever hunted it was bigger and stronger than the moose itself. There was no other explanation for the state it was in. And right then, my mind went back to that sound I had heard just a little while ago. Whatever it was had perhaps hunted this moose first, and was then making its way toward my campsite. I didn't waste any more time, as I already understood that whatever was out there a little while ago might now be following me. I immediately pulled out my compass, checked my direction, and diverted my route to avoid having to pass by the dead moose. But there was another problem. The path I was now taking was even denser, and since it was already nearly dark, it was going to be even riskier. But at that moment, I felt it was at least a little safer than the path I had been on, so I started moving that way immediately. And then what I feared actually happened, as I could hear something behind me, following me. The weight of its footsteps was so heavy, and the sound it made was enough to send chills through my entire body. Part of me wanted to turn around and look at what was following me, but another part of me said it was better not to, that looking might only make things worse. I picked up my pace, but the worst part was that it was now very dark. and the flashlight I had wasn't strong enough to properly light the path ahead. After walking like this for about 10 to 12 minutes, I noticed the trees ahead were starting to thin out, so I thought maybe I was getting close to the bridge. And right at that moment, the sound that had been quietly following me was now getting much louder. It was now clear that whatever was following me wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I kept my pace and then broke into a full run because I could clearly tell the bridge was very close now. When I finally reached the bridge, just before stepping onto it, I looked back one last time, and even now, I sometimes think it would have been better if I hadn't. I don't know what you'll think of me, whether you'll think I'm out of my mind or not, but I know what I saw. Standing right at the edge of the forest was an enormous creature. Its head was like a moose, with very large antlers. The way it stood was almost like a human on two legs. Its arms were much longer than a normal body would have. It looked almost human in some ways, but it wasn't because its entire body was covered in thick fur. What I couldn't understand was why it wasn't coming any further past the tree line. It felt like there was some invisible barrier between us, and that was the only reason I was still safe. I stared at it for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, and then I couldn't bring myself to look any longer. So I started making my way across the bridge. But since it was nighttime, and the bridge was already in bad shape, crossing from one end to the other was terrifying. When I finally reached the other side and looked back, the creature was gone. I got in my car and drove straight home. When I lay down on my bed, I still couldn't believe what had just happened to me out there in that forest. I had been to those Alaskan forests so many times for camping, not that particular trail, but many others, and nothing like this had ever happened to me before. After what happened today, I'll probably still go camping, but the next time I do, I will never have the courage to try a new trail again.
This is probably why I don't enjoy solo camping as much anymore. I used to, but now whenever I go camping, these kinds of stories start running through my head, and it honestly makes me quite uneasy. Now, instead of just saying he, let's call him Rob. If Rob had brought a friend along on that camping trip, even the friend who suggested the trail in the first place, things might have gone a little better. If we really think about the story carefully, when Rob was sleeping and woke up to that first cracking sound nearby, if that sound was actually from the creature, just think about how close Rob was to it at that moment. That creature could have done anything to him. But maybe Rob was just lucky that day. Because if luck hadn't been on his side, Rob wouldn't have been able to tell us this story at all. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this story.
I am a resident of Maryland, and I have been living here for a long time. And right behind my house, if you walk a short distance, there is a stream with clear flowing water, and beyond that, there is a dense forest. The environment in that area is quite nice, which is why I, along with some of my friends and my dog, often go there to spend some time. And every time I have gone there, I have never seen any other people around except us. That is not very surprising because the forest there is extremely large and dense. But the last time I went there, the incident I am about to talk about happened, and after that, we stopped going there completely. Now this happened about 2 to 3 months ago, and that day, my cousins had come over to my house, and we were all playing Raven. After playing for quite a while, we thought we should go to the stream for a bit, just to pass some time. It was late December, and even for that time of year, the weather felt quite warm. When we stepped outside the house, we noticed my younger cousin playing football alone outside. We decided to take him along with us, and all of us went to the stream to spend some time there. Staying inside the house the whole time never feels as fun. Whenever my cousins visit, we almost always go to that place, so if we had skipped it that day, it would not have felt right. Besides, we were also starting to feel a bit bored. There were 4 of my cousins together, and if I count myself, that makes 5 of us. The walk there probably took around 2 to 3 minutes, since we were just walking casually. When we reached the stream, there was a fairly large tree right beside it, and we often climbed that tree whenever we came there. Naturally, my cousins climbed up the tree again and started talking among themselves. I was mostly keeping an eye on my youngest cousin because he is very mischievous, and no one can predict what he might suddenly do. By the time we reached the place, it had already started to look a little like evening. For some reason, as soon as I got there, I began to feel like someone was watching us. It was a strange feeling, and I had never experienced it there before. I looked around carefully to check the area, but I could not see anyone, so I thought maybe I was just imagining things. After some time, we were sitting there and talking, when suddenly I heard a sound. It came from behind a tree a little distance away from where I was sitting. As soon as I turned around and looked, I saw someone standing there. The tree was positioned in such a way that it looked like he was hiding behind it and watching us. Immediately, I went into alert mode, and when I told my cousins about it, they also said they had heard the same sound. So first, we started walking toward the tree, where we heard the noise. Normally, people advise that if you hear something strange like that, it is better to leave the area. But since we were young, that kind of thought did not come to our minds. All we were thinking was about who was watching us like that. When we went there, we noticed that the man was no longer standing the way he was before. This time, he was crouching down and facing the opposite direction from us, so we could only see his back. We asked him what he was doing there and why he had been looking at us like that. But the moment we asked the question, he immediately turned his head toward us and, without saying anything, started running straight into the deeper part of the forest. Even though it was December and the weather during the day could still feel warm, at night it usually becomes quite cold. Even in that condition, he was wearing only shorts and a normal green t-shirt. Since our youngest cousin was with us, we did not try to follow him. And honestly, why would we follow him anyway? He hadn't directly threatened us in any way, so we didn't think too much about it and started heading back. But what happened after that was even more unsettling. When we started walking away from that tree, the man had already left about 3 to 4 minutes earlier, so a fair amount of time had already passed. As we were heading back toward the house, since it was already starting to get dark, we suddenly saw another person standing a little farther away from that tree, looking at us in the same way. The moment I noticed him staring at us like that, a real and intense fear started to build among us. I felt a chill run through my body, and this wasn't something that only I saw. It wasn't just something I imagined in my head. All four of my cousins saw it too. And this time the person didn't run away. I should also mention that I couldn't see him very clearly because he was standing quite far away, but I was able to notice the color of his shirt, and it was also the same green color. I couldn't understand whether it was the same person we saw earlier or someone different, but the way he was staring at us wasn't the way a normal person would look at someone. We didn't waste any time after that. Instead of simply walking, we almost ran all the way back home. When we reached home, I didn't tell my parents about it because I didn't even know what I would say. But since that day, we haven't gone back to that place at all. Maybe someday in the future, we will go there again when this fear fades a little. But right now, after what we experienced that day, none of us has the courage to go back there.
In my opinion, those boys made a serious mistake by not telling their parents about the incident at home. Yes, maybe nothing very serious really happened, but from the story, what I understood is that their motive didn't feel very good to me. And that is exactly why incidents like this should definitely be reported to the police. Now, if some of you are a little confused about why in this story I am not using any background images or videos, and how I am editing it instead, I showed this for a very simple reason. I actually want to show you how I edit my videos. It takes a lot of time and patience, and that is what I wanted to show you a little bit. because these days many people might think that a video can be created with just one click. Yeah, maybe some people can do that, but from the very beginning of my channel, I have edited every single video myself. I just wanted to show you that. And, could you please write and let me know one thing? If I continue doing this, meaning in future videos, if in the second or third video I also show some of my editing process, would that cause any problem for you? Please give me a little feedback about this. And thank you for watching.